Hey everybody, Jared here. I have a new one today, and I want to talk today about color blindness. Not everybody sees the world in the same way. Inside of our eye, we have two different receptors. We have rods and cones, and the cones are used to detect color. There's different types of cones in the eye, and some people have a chromosomal aberration that don't see all the colors that other people do. There's actually varying differentiations of chromosomal aberrations there. Now, interestingly enough, when you're dealing with colorblind people, you're going to find is that there are people that have X chromosomes and XY chromosomes. And if you're a double X chromosome, because you're a double X chromosome, you are less likely to be colorblind than if you are an XY chromosome, because the colorblind deficiency is in the X chromosome. If you've got two, you're less likely to be. So if you're XY, you're a higher probability of being colorblind than if you're XX. Let's not talk about this in terms of gender specificity. We don't use those terms anymore. It's chromosomes, not male versus female. Keep that in mind. So, anyway, by the way, this is the only reason you can be colorblind. There's actually varying reasons. You could have brain injuries, eye injuries, all sorts of biological things as well. But mostly it's chromosomal. All right, let's continue. So, why is this important? Well, interestingly enough, for many, many years, we didn't always think about it. As a teacher, I'm giving out handouts. Most of the time, I was doing black and white. And by the way, black and white, pretty much kosher. Still have to worry about people with low contrast. And of course, again, there's issues that we run into there as well. Now, accommodation is kind of a funny thing. Accommodation does not mean that we are going to roll everything down to the lowest common denominator. That's not what accommodation is. Accommodation is trying to make sure that we are not thinking about those people who have other things that are needed. And colorblind is actually much bigger than you think it is. Now, interestingly enough, I teach at an art school, and so probably you correctly guess, most of my students are not colorblind. But I also teach at Case Western Reserve, where I have a large population of people, and with a big population of people, any percentage might be colorblind. So that means, and there's really two major types of colorblindness. One is a red-green deficiency, where you're going to either not see red or not see green, and so you get some imbalances there. Or you're going to have a blue-yellow deficiency. I have a lot of friends who are colorblind. It's actually kind of a running joke with my friends. I go, "What do you think of this?" And they go, "I'm colorblind." Interestingly enough, a lot of those friends have apps on their phones where they can actually point to something and say, that is reddish or that is greenish, which is great for like dressing themselves and wearing the appropriately colored socks and things like that. But what about things when you're doing handouts? What about things where you're trying to give things to students? And this had recently come across. Somebody had contacted me and said, I have these images I downloaded from the internet that they were using for part of a lecture, and they wanted to make sure that the students could be able to see it properly. I don't think anyone had identified themselves as colorblind. I think they just got a little bit weirded out by this and wanted to make sure they were doing the right thing, which is great. Everybody should be thinking about doing the right thing. By the way, I'm in a design field, and I always forget that I actually should be. If I care, I should think about these things. And that's the thing is, it's good to think about it. Let's take a look at a couple images. The first image was this one over here. And the question was, how would this look to a colorblind person? And the answer is fine. There's only one color here. It's a monochromatic image. The idea is you're trying to differentiate between shades of red. I'll be honest with you, that's not easy. Color aside. Matter of fact, let's actually suck out the red for a moment. Grayscale, look at that. That's what a photocopy would look like. That's kind of low contrast. And to sit here and go, can you tell the difference between? That's not easy. And so from a design perspective, I would actually really try to up the contrast on this to make it a little bit easier to see. But even then, it's still not going to be great. So I will be honest with you, from a color blindness perspective, I'd be fine on this. But if I really wanted to make sure that I understood the subtleties there, it would take me a while to stare at this image and kind of really understand anything but the broadest of strokes. Let me give you another example. I'm not going to save that. No. Let's come over here and look at this one. So here's another one as well. Obviously, again, it's monochromatic. It's using a green scale. And again, if I come over here and I make a grayscale, I can pretty much see what's going on here. And it works fairly well. And it works fairly well because it's not just about the value. It's also about the position, right? Now, I would say that's interesting enough that it almost goes down. I wish they'd have organized this a little bit better. That's the problem with these things. Organizing data, organizing charts and graphs is an art form. It's a skill. And a lot of people just throw data up and they just assume everyone's going to be seeing it the same way. This one's actually not bad. It holds up as grayscale. One good metric is if it holds up as grayscale, you're probably fine. All right. Let's go back to the third one. I love this one because this one is terrible. This one is terrible because if I come over here and I make it grayscale, you're like, dude, I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm looking at here. They're just There's too much subtleties here. And the reason that this sucks, and I'll use the word sucks, is that if you look carefully at it, they only used one dimension, and that dimension was color. In other words, they literally said the only way to know the difference between, let's see, the red one, by the way, is world. I'm covering it right here. World. The difference between world and Congo is if you can see the difference between red and cyan. And that's terrible. And what's terrible about it is they had options. For instance, instead of using circles, they could have done square and triangle. And in other words, they could have done shapes. They could have done a second thing to make it clear. And that's a good thing. You can say, I'm going to make this as easy as possible. This isn't just about colorblind people. It's about trying to be effective with your data. You want to make it as easy as possible to follow along. So if you can make it easy, do it. Luckily with this one, because somebody who had contacted me used this image, because there's very little overlap here, you easily could have put a little A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then labeled these A, B, C, D, E, F, G along the bottom. I even, if I had rooms, could have actually put the words in here as well. So there was other ways of handling this. This is one of those things where you're like, I let the software do the work for me. But the software can't do the design work for you. And that's the dangerous part about graphs and things like that. So I think it's important to realize that we look at this. Oh, by the way, Photoshop has a filter in it that allows you to see both types of red, green color blindness. If I click on View Proof Setup and go to this one, that's what it would look like as someone who was red-green colorblind. There's a second red-green colorblind in this as well. Photoshop cannot do the blue-yellow or all the other variations. There's many variations out there. How are you going to do everything for everybody? Well, the answer is you're not. You're going to be conscientious. That's what you're going to be for everybody. Remember, there's always going to be somebody out there who needs something. And my advice to you as a teacher is, yeah, I put the little boilerplate, if you have any accommodations on, but you can't just put it on like it's boilerplate. You can't just put that little word on the thing that says, if you have an accommodation, we will take care of it. Everybody does it, but do you mean it? And how do you let people know? How do you let students, how do you let your customers, how do you let anybody know that you mean it? And the answer is you go out of your way. And so as a teacher myself, when I get to that point in the syllabus, I go, hey, everybody, this is not boilerplate. I mean it. I don't mean it. Don't call yourself out today. Don't say, hey, just say, I'm available to you. I want to know what your accommodations are. And even if you don't think you need an accommodation, I teach a studio art class. I teach a class where there are no exams. So the first thing a student's going to say is, well, I don't need my accommodation letter because I don't need more time in an exam. And I'm like, just because there's no exam doesn't mean I can't make an accommodation that will actually help you because you normally have an exam. So I ask students if they want, if they need, that they shouldn't be shy about it because those are there for a reason. I walk with a cane sometimes, and I have a hang tag for my car, and I don't feel ashamed when I park in that space. That space is an accommodation that's used to make my life easier because I need it, and it's nothing that you should be ashamed of if you have an accommodation. So I think it's very important to remember that in the best possible way. Accommodations are there to make the world a better place, and we can do that. So, since you can't predict everything, and by the way, I've had all sorts of accommodations that people have needed from me. I've had students who said, I need to take a quick snack. I need to take a little nap. I need to walk out of the room if my anxiety is there. And we can sit here and ask ourselves, how can we accommodate that without necessarily embarrassing somebody? Sometimes that's just enough. So, if you run into the situation where somebody is colorblind or some other situation that you're not aware of, it's nice to be able to have this in your back pocket. Now, again, this one here, this image in front of me, easily, and again, it's tricky if you downloaded it, right? It's bad that we sometimes have to do with other people's materials. But if you are designing for things, you can sit here and say, the more multimodal I make my infographics, the easier it will be that I'll never find somebody who I've hit all of their things where they can't do any of it. Simple as that. One last thing, by the way, really cool website. I'm going to include a link to it. Color-blindness.com has a color blindness simulator on it. And you can come over here and you can literally look at red week, I said red week, right? Green week, blue week, red blind, green blind, blue cone monochromacy, or just straight monochromacy. So you can bring your images in and you can test them if you're worried. No one is saying that you need to be wandering around and freaking out about every little thing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying here is if you have something that you're suspect with, you can bring it here to test. But more importantly, and I want to thank the person who brought me this issue in the first place, their vigilance was great. I don't even think they have a colorblind student. They were just concerned. They wanted to be proactive, and kudos to them. Again, color blindness is a thing. Nothing bad about it. Percentage of the people hit it. And we can make sure that we are not using color as our only indicator on things that are significant. Anyway, thanks for watching.